Well, greetings everyone, and welcome once again to another episode of the Sports Crib. A lot of things to talk about tonight. The start of the MLB season is here upon us. Uh, Football trades and movements are all in amongst all teams is alive and well. We've seen some new names, some old names moving from teams to teams, and we have the playoffs. Well, the play-ins, the playoffs we'll talk about next week. But in the meantime, get Mr. Carroll in here. Bill, how are you doing this evening?
It has been an interesting week,
Yeah.
both in you know life, the nature.
Uh, Unfortunately, we've lost you there. We can no longer hear you. We know your lips are moving, but there is no sound immediately.
There we go.
There
That
you
should have fixed it.
go. Okay, there you go. I was just saying, there's a lot of things to talk about this week. The, of course, crowning achievement in a lot of people's books, especially those that are real golf enthusiasts. Uh, Tiger not only made the cut, but he was actually, in many people's eyes, the hero and the winner of the Masters just by finishing. Even though he shot a 78, his worst, I believe his worst score ever at the Masters.
Yep.
But the fact that he was able to kind of grit it through as people watched him grimace going down the fairway, and the fact that this was his tune-up, so to speak. What were your thoughts? I mean, as of course, a black man, any time that you have the red shirt on Sunday, I'm going to at least flip back and forth between channels.
Well, here's the main thing that I noticed. This is not, the Tiger Woods of 25 years ago, not the Tiger Woods of 10 years ago, not the Tiger Woods of 5 years ago. This is a new and different person, a new and different player, a new and different athlete, a new and different husband, well, father, new and different father, I guess, not really husband so much. But this is not the same player that we've been watching in the past. He is not physically the same. He is not mentally the same. He has different priorities. He cares about different things. He's playing for different reasons now. He's no longer trying to show anyone or prove to anyone or even to himself that he's the greatest golfer of all time. People are either convinced of that or they are not. He is no longer trying to chase anybody else. He is simply a man, a lion in winter, right? As the line goes, that is trying to go out of this sport with dignity and honor and leave the sport better than he left it. And I think he's going to accomplish those things. Might he win another major? I mean, I want to say no, but every time you write off Eldrick Tonk Woods Jr., he does something that makes you regret writing him off. He is, we don't always talk about toughness when we talk about golfers. In fact, we rarely talk about toughness when we talk about golfers. But we're going to have to talk about toughness when we talk about his performance. It was as gutsy a performance as, Phillip Rivers playing a playoff game with a blown ACL. It was of course, he's done that before too, right? We've seen him play with stress fractures in his legs and blown ACL and bad backs. But this is beyond all of that. Like all the stuff that he's done in the past was when he was still near his peak as a player and still trying to accomplish things or establish things about who he was and what he was as a player. All that stuff, right, gone out the window. And like I said, either you're convinced or you're not that he's the greatest player of all time. And he's beyond caring, I think, or beyond trying to convince you. He's playing golf for the first time since probably his mid-teens. simply because he wants to play golf, right? There's no more money to be made. I mean, he could make more money, I guess, but for what? His family is set for, I don't know, 5 generations. I mean, pick a number. He has either, like I said, accomplished virtually everything that can be accomplished in the sport, or all but maybe 1 or 2 things that can be accomplished in this sport. And he'll go down as, if not number 1, then I don't know, maybe you could argue number 3 if you were really feeling feisty. I think he's either number 1 or number 2 in my book. But he's now playing golf for the reasons that, like I said, he hasn't been able to play golf this purely, for lack of a way of putting it, since he was, I don't know, a 10th grader maybe. Like LeBron, like a handful of others, I mean, I first heard his name when he was not even in high school. He was probably, I don't know, even the Mike Douglas show when he was like 3 or 4 years old, hitting balls. But he was still able to play for the love of the game. And now he's back to that. I mean, if he said, I'm never playing another round of golf tomorrow, people would be like, I completely understand, right? Nobody would fault him. He's playing because he says, I've got golf left in me. In fact, my favorite quote from this whole thing is he's asked about his game. He said, my game's fine. It's walking that's the problem, right? Think about that. Oh, my game is fine. Walking is the problem. If he was able to ride in a cart, one, he doesn't shoot 78. I'm convinced that he doesn't shoot anything worse than maybe 73, 74 at the worst the whole weekend. If he's able to just ride along in a cart like, quote unquote, normal people. But this is not a normal person, and he's not being treated as anything but what he is, a person who has carried the game. I won't say alone. There have been other great players that have crossed his timeline, including Sergio and, Rory and even David Duval and obviously Lefty, Mickelson, a few others that, at one point he had, some competition from them, and now he's not competing against anybody but his own body. That's his only competition. His bad back, his shattered leg, the list of physical maladies, that is his opponent now, his own body. But his body of work is perfect and unassailable. And say what else you want to say about him. For me, I got to see Jack Nicklaus throughout the prime of his career. I got to see Arnold Palmer at the very, very end of his career. And there's really no other names that you can, in my mind, that can or should be mentioned in the same breath with his. That's it, right? If you want to finish out the, what do they call it, the Mount Rushmore, I guess you could throw somebody like, I don't know, Slammin' Sammy Snead or somebody up there as well, or Ben Hogan or something. But he's on the Mount Rushmore of golf, and nothing he does, nothing that happens will ever change that. I think what he's doing now is, like I said, playing the game he loves for the love of the game. That's it.
Yeah, that's a good point to be made there. I see Mr. Scott is here, so let's talk a little baseball here. Mr. Scott is in, and I'm pretty sure we can tap a little bit about his history of the game and his love of the game. Considering that tomorrow is Jackie Robinson Day. Mr. Scott, how are you doing this evening?
Greetings. Doing quite well. Still have my heat on here, which I'm upset about, but it's a necessity. So,
well, Bill might be in the same boat with you. I'm not sure, but
it was a glorious 51 here today, so I have no idea what he's talking about.
That's for sure.
Well, I won't mention how high in the 60s we are today, but that's another conversation. But Mr. Scott, tomorrow's Jackie Robinson Day. Your thoughts?
So, I know when they used to have it, everybody wore the number 42, and it was almost like something that they were just discovering. So I don't. I don't know. It's hard for me to. I'm getting into baseball, but I'm telling you, I wanted to go see the Dodgers, like I mentioned, but it was just too cold. I just could not go. I can't sit out there in this kind of 35, 40 degree. But I would have missed Kershaw almost throw a perfect game,
Yep.
and there's a lot of controversy about that.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that.
Yeah, yeah. But the Jackie Rob, I mean, it's in a way, it's almost farcical to say that, as we know, denying the black players to play baseball, and I really applaud the Negro leagues personally because building their own league, their own stadiums, filling up major league stadiums. And there's always a controversy about how integration has it been great for the African American baseball player? When you had your own league, you had your own jobs, you had your own, maybe could have grown, maybe could have even been brought into the league. So it's, the Jackie Robinson, it's almost like a token thing to me now that the league is doing.
What's your thoughts on that, Bill?
Sure. My and once again, I guess I won't be doing this in my final thoughts, but I've read recently a couple of different biographies of a fascinating. I think I might have mentioned her on the show before. A fascinating woman. So we talk about breakthroughs that came out of a lot of things, including the Negro Leagues. And to me, one of the most interesting breakthroughs is that, of course, they had a woman owner and a woman who was essentially passing for black, for lack of a better way of putting it. The Newark Eagles had been bought by a gentleman who owned I guess a bus line, and he had married a woman who had grown up in the black community, but my research indicates that essentially her mother was an Indonesian immigrant, and her father, depending on who you believe, and there's some discussion or some disagreement about whether this is true or not, but her father apparently, according to whatever I've been able to discover thus far, and what what she herself reported, was apparently her mother's white employer. I can neither confirm or deny that, other than that's what the story that had been handed down was. But she lived in the black community, married two black men, married one, and then after that marriage ended, married a second one, and the second one was the one that had purchased the Newark Eagles. The Negro Leagues were fascinating because, unlike any other business, that when the major leagues eventually came down and said we would like that one and give us Don Newcomb and we would like Larry Doby or whatever, for the most part, and Jackie Robinson and Satchel Paige, the Negro Leagues were like, yes, please take them, except right, the one great exception was the Newark Eagles, and they had Larry Doby, and she insisted, no, I have a contract with Mr. Lawrence Doby. You will compensate me for this very valuable asset that will reduce the value of my ball club. And everyone reacted with sort of like shock and horror, like, how dare you not just hand over your best player to the major leagues? And she was like, well, wait, why? I mean, it might be a great honor for him, but it's gutting my team. Like, why would I be in favor of? Why would I be, why would this be? Tell me how this helps me. Like, explain it to me like I'm a 5-year-old is what people say nowadays, right? Explain to me like I'm a 5-year-old why I would want to give the best player, maybe the best player in the history of my franchise, only one of the best players in the history of my franchise, to this whole other league that does nothing for us financially, right? Does nothing for us in terms of, I mean, all they do is after, having the back closed on us and back turned to us for all this time, when they feel like it, come and scoop up our best players without compensating us. So there was, like I said, some Effa Manley was sort of, I don't know, lots of, murmuring, I guess, about Effa Manley. And, so it was a baseball team, that was owned and operated by a woman, right? The other woman in the major leagues that was a primary owner was Olivia Taylor. who owned the Indianapolis ABCs. So there were two female owners of ball clubs in the Negro Leagues, I don't know, decades and decades and decades before women would be thought of as serious figures in the executive levels of, well, any major sport, right? That I can name, that I know of at least. So part of the things that excite me about knowing the history of the Negro Leagues, in addition to knowing about all the great players, many of whom are still not in the Hall of Fame and should be, and added to that, as was just pointed out so accurately, that these were businesses that were owned by Black people who lived in the Black community, right? The players lived in the Black community, the owners lived in the Black community, the traveling secretaries, managers, like these were people who were accessible. There were people who would just go see Josh Gibson, right? Like, hey, I hear Josh is having, liquor and pig's feet at so-and-so's, and they would go around the corner and buy him a whiskey or whatever. So we now, like, you can't just walk up. Well, you actually could try to walk up to Mike Trout and buy him a drink, but it might not work out how you'd like it to. The best players in the league, whoever it is, were all accessible to the Black community. And you had also white fans and white writers, right, who wrote about the Negro Leagues. In fact, a man that I interviewed for a play I was writing with a friend of mine who unfortunately passed away, and then we sort of ended up, well, not we, I guess it was just me at that point, ended up sort of shelving the project. It was a play called Playing Out the String, and it was about Negro Leaguers in the Negro Leagues as the Negro Leagues are sort of seeing their end, right? Seeing their end coming as the best younger players who were Black were now heading straight toward the majors, or being snatched up out of the Negro Leagues and heading towards the majors, and the ones that are left behind, in essence, as the title says, playing out the string. And to prepare for it, I interviewed a man named Theodore Ratcliffe, Double Duty Ratcliffe. And he would be perfect for the After Dark segment. Despite being well into his 90s when I was interviewing, I think it was 96 when he finally passed. I interviewed him, and my now late friend Sati Word had interviewed him several times for this play we were writing. And he had amazing stories, right? He played against Ted Williams. He played, whoever, in, the Dominican and Venezuela and other places, and handled some of them quite readily. And no lesser a person than Damon Runyon gave him the nickname Double Duty Ratcliffe. Damon Runyon was sitting in the stands when Double Duty pitched one half of a doubleheader, caught the second half of a doubleheader, and hit a game-hitting home run in the second half of a doubleheader. And Damon Runyon was writing up the game and gave him the nickname Double Duty Ratcliffe, which stuck forever. And, people just called him Duty by the time, I met him. He was, like I said, well in his 90s. But what does this mean? What does Jackie Robinson mean? That was my father's maximum number one hero. And I can roll off. The reason I can roll off the names and batting averages and heights and weights of members of the 1947 to 52 or so Dodgers without thinking, Bud Pabili and Clem Labine, right? George Shotgun Shuba.
We don't want you to do it, Bill. We don't want you to do it.
I won't. I'm just letting you know I can. But the reason I can do that is because of my father, who idolized and loved Jackie Robinson. And it is impossible to explain now, even with people like Michael Jordan and LeBron James, how important Jackie was. Muhammad Ali probably comes the closest. But by the time Ali comes along, we have the nascent Black Power movement, right? The civil rights movement is well established. We have advancements in other areas. Brown versus Board of Education, passes 2 years before he goes to fight in the Melbourne Olympics. So he's entering the stage when we're a little further down the road than Jackie, right? Jackie hits the stage, right as World War II ends, and the whole double V, right, thing is still being decided. And America is still, an apartheid nation in every way, as much as South Africa or any other place you could name. And so when Jackie hits the American national consciousness, he is at that point the most, not just the most famous black man in America, but the most important. No offense to Thurgood Marshall, whoever else you want to name, but he's Bayard Rustin or anyone else. Whether it's fair or not, whether it makes sense or not, he is the most important black man in America because baseball was the most important single thing in American popular life, right? It's once again hard to imagine for people below a certain age, but baseball was it. I mean, every other sport was fighting for second. Boxing, horse racing, football, whatever, we're all fighting for second. It was America was baseball's. Baseball was America's. And the two were inseparable, right? To the point that, as you've seen in all war movies, and it's true, right? Where they would use cosigns for sentry duty, would be names of baseball players, right?
Now we see why Bill was an officer. Because we can never, because he can go on and on and on. But but Bill, I have another topic that I want to discuss with you, but Mr. Scott is here, so we have to give him some time also.
Please do.
But I did want to make just a comment on what Bill said about the accessibility of the black baseball athletes in the community, because that's the way it was back in the late 50s and 60s when I started watching baseball. When the Twins came here, that was really when I started to really I was 10 years old, and I mean, this was the biggest thing going on. But Earl Batty lived in our neighborhood. I mean, the kids would go and play catch with Earl Batty over in St. Paul at Oxford Playground.
Wow.
Zoilo Vitales, Tony Oliva still lives in Bloomington, the same house he's always lived in.
Huh.
So these guys were very, very accessible. They were part of the community then. It wasn't this disconnect where they're out in Minnetonka and these big mansions and out on lakes. It wasn't like that then. Matter of fact, Zoilo's wife worked at the McDonald's in Bloomington, and she worked there till she died. And I used to just go there just to see her and get hamburgers out in Bloomington. So yeah, that was a different. And my big deal was seeing the National League. Oh my goodness, they had 2 All-Star games. At that, the 61-62, they had 2 All-Star games. And to see the National League with Mays, Aaron, Willie McCovey, Orlando Cepeda, I mean, it was just, I was in love with it. It really, that's all we did, play baseball all day long.
Yeah, I remember those days, after school, going home, getting your baseball glove, having pickup games and the different organized leagues, things that you don't really see anymore. But another name that I'm sure you're familiar with, Mr. Scott, Ferguson Jenkins.
Fergie.
They're going to put up a statue of Fergie down there at the Cubs field, along with Ernie Banks and who else is in this park here? I know it's Ernie Banks, Billy Williams, Ron Santos, and Fergie. You got any remembrances of Fergie? You talk about the National League there, Mr. Scott. This is way before Sammy Sosa.
Fergie was the workhorse pitcher. This is a guy comes in and 20 wins, pitching the whole game. He was a real workhorse pitcher. And by having Ernie, Ernie left the Negro Leagues, as they called it, and he went right to the Cubs. There was no they just signed him, and he was playing with the Cubs right away the next day. So what that did was eradicated this thing about it's a minor league or it's a. When they came in, and Fergie, I believe, was a Canadian.
Yes, he was and still is.
Yeah, and I don't know how he ended up in Canada. I haven't really looked into that. Where I know he's a longtime Canadian citizen, which I thought that was very interesting because I didn't know at that time a lot of Black Canadians and the stature of Fergie as like I say, one of the top pitchers as long as he plays, one of the top pitchers in the league. So I think it's a great tribute. And Chicago is a real good. I mean, they had Negro League teams. My dad recalls going to White Sox Park and seeing the Negro League teams playing at the White Sox Park, and they were drawing more fans than the White Sox would for those games. They'd have an all-star game there at the White Sox Park that he would go to. So, big part of our history.
In answer to your question about so his mother's from Barbados, and his father can traces other way around. Sorry, the father's from Barbados. His father's from Barbados. His mother can trace her lineage back to escaped slaves who made it up through Ohio into Ontario, Canada.
Wow.
Through the Underground Railroad.
Speaking of the White Sox, Bill, even though the season's already started, there will be history made tomorrow. Actually, since the beginning of the season, the White Sox shortstop Tim Anderson and their newly acquired second baseman Josh Hamilton will be the only black double play combo in the major leagues.
Yep.
Talk about that history, Bill.
Well, as we know, in the late 70s, early 80s, black participation in the major leagues peaked, right? And it slowly started to come down every few years ever since then. And it can be blamed on a lot of different things. From the deaths of some of the things like the police athletic leagues and things like that, that I won't say they don't exist anymore, but they don't exist in the same sort of quality or quantity they once did. You know, Optimist and all these other leagues that I remember as a kid growing up, either I can't find them anymore or like I said, they exist in almost like hothouse flowers, like in only a few places. And you just mentioned this thing, pick up baseball, right? It's a term I'd have to explain to someone who's less than 30 because kids don't play pickup baseball anymore. The kids who play baseball play organized baseball. They play travel baseball. They play in this league or that league. But pickup baseball is gone. It's as gone as the Edsel, right? It's something like I said, you have to explain it slowly to anybody below who's about 25 years younger than me. You have to explain it to them what you mean by the term pickup baseball. So as that has happened, and as it's become almost like a country club sport, right? The average socioeconomics of the kids that play at the highest level of baseball has gone upward, right? As opposed to staying flat or going downward. The place where poor kids pick up baseball is the Dominican and Venezuela, and right. So the most common surname in Major League Baseball is, you guessed it, Rodriguez, right? There are more Rodriguezes in the NFL. Sorry, Major League Baseball, than any other last name. So we don't have that, partially due to urbanization. My dad grew up in the country. They would finish their chores and they'd play baseball until it was time to eat. Then they played baseball after they ate.
Until it was dark.
Right, exactly. Until it was dark. Exactly. And sometimes a little bit after it was dark. So somebody got hit in the face or whatever. Like, okay, I guess that's it. So
somebody's mom called, the street lights were on,
Oh, there were the street lights where I grew up. My dad was in the country.
Where's Billy? And Billy got two of the bats and one of the bases and two or three of the balls and
sharing each other's glove, sharing the same glove.
Wait, you left your glove in the field, right?
Right.
Maybe I'm getting too old here, but that's how I remember it.
Sure. Oh, kids. Once again, when my dad grew up dirt poor in the country, they shared everything. As my dad's no longer here to defend himself, so I can tell this story. He and his cousin Harold were about the same age, about the same size, so they could go to church in alternate weeks because they had one good pair of shoes between the two of them. It was a very different time. So yes, my dad grew up in the Depression in very, very, very remote, distant area. Like electricity came through there in 1950. In 1950, okay, That's how country they were. So yes, the rural electrification project reached them around 1950. So my dad grew up literally in the early part of his life, coal lamps and stuff. Yeah, that's how far in the country I'm talking. So no, there were no street lights, Mr. King, where my dad grew up. No, streetlights were something they saw when they went to the movies and saw Humphrey Bogart or whoever with streetlights. That's how my dad knew streetlights existed.
Mr. Scott, what about the first time you left home to go play college baseball?
Well, that's my brother that played college baseball.
Okay. Okay. That was one that we met earlier this week, I believe, right?
Yeah, that was my brother Walter. Yeah, he
Oh.
would follow me everywhere on the teams, and he would be our bat boy. And my folks would work, and I'd have to get to baseball practice, or I'd have to run around the whole field if you're late.
Yep.
So I'd put him on my bike if they weren't there, and I'd ride that mile to the park with him on the bike. And I'd still have to run my thing around the park because I was late. But he would take batting practice. He would be the bat boy. And he became a wonderful player. He ended up playing at Alabama State for 4 years. He was a coach here at Minneapolis Public Schools for years, baseball coach. And those days of playing baseball, growing up, we could play with 3 or 4 people. We would play pitcher's hand. We could play a game where you only can hit to the left field. If you hit it somewhere else, it's out.
Yep.
We could make up games where there was 3 or 4, no matter how many people we had, even if it was 2 of us. We could just, me and my brother, and we could have a game of baseball because that's what we did.
Right. We played a game where the catcher was a box, literally a box. And if right?
I remember those, yeah.
Right. And so right. So if you threw the ball and the batter didn't hit it and it ended up in the box, right? You got that's a strike. If it missed the box, that's the ball, right? Yeah. Very simple, very easy. Who needs a robo up? And right, as you said, you would designate certain places. If it hits that, that's out. If it hits that, that's it. If it hits that, then it's a ground rule double or whatever. And yeah, you would advantage or disadvantage some teams based on if they had younger players. Like, we'll give you one extra player because you're playing with an 8-year-old. I mean, kids. This is the thing I say a lot of times: problem solving. So much of what we learned because we played outdoors with other kids. Sometimes kids we didn't know. I would get on my bike and ride to other neighborhoods and play with kids I didn't know, and you learn things from that. One, if those are kids you want to play with or not. But you learn problem solving. There was no adult there to tell us, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, or that's not fair. We all worked that stuff out.
And you learned people. I know we had a guy come in our neighborhood once, a white guy from Mississippi, called himself Johnny Reb. And he talked like he could play baseball. He could play better than anybody. Could not play a lick. But he could talk like he could talk his way into anything down in Mississippi. And so you began to know the difference between the ones that can, the ones that can't. And, it was a learning thing because you were on your own a lot. At least we were, just by necessity. We were on our own, me and my brother, a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, and like you said, it wasn't any knock against the parents for not being at the house, but I mean, we didn't have video games. Most of the time, you and the kid next door, the kid across the street, and then maybe schools or whatever. But yeah, there was a lot of interactions that we don't have now, especially in our kids. Um, Mr. Scott, you kind of mentioned it about Mr. Kershaw's game, perfect game through 7 innings. There was a lot of controversy. Not from Kershaw himself. Kershaw said, hey, I'm getting up there. And I guess I kind of appreciated it in a way. And even though he had 13 Ks, he said it wasn't his best stuff. But as you mentioned, Mr. Scott, it was what 35 degrees outside. Uh, but what was your thoughts? Do you think the team should have let him finish it? As a fan, do you regret that he didn't finish it? Or I mean, what was your thoughts on that? As you mentioned, back in the day, 9 innings,
James, can you
maybe
imagine?
10.
Can you imagine what would have happened if somebody tried to pull Bob Gibson while he was throwing a perfect
It'd be a
game?
fight. It would be a fight. Yeah, it'd be a fight. But but in regards to the Kershaw thing,
Fergie, even Fergie, as you were talking about, could you
no,
imagine?
yeah, no, no. Well, Jack Morris in the World Series, Tom Kelly came out and he got summarily sent back to the dugout. I mean, but with the Kershaw thing, we're early in the season. We've had a pandemic, short spring training. It's 30 some degrees. And the bottom line is I don't second guess Dave Roberts. I mean, he knows more about baseball than I do. And so he knows his players, they respect him, he wins. I mean, and it's a different situation than when we had a situation here where Adrian Peterson could have set the record. He could have set the rushing record, and Leslie Frazier took him out. Now that I don't know if I don't know why. All he had to do was put him in one more play. He would have broke the record. He'd be the all-time leading rushing yardage leader. All he had to do, but he was taken out. Now for me, that one bothers me. That one bothered me because he had it. It's the end of the season. There was no reason to me. He's healthy. There's no reason to take him out. But the Kershaw, I don't have a problem with it early in the season. And Kershaw is good enough where he can probably do that again.
And under much warmer conditions, also. What was your thoughts on that, Bill?
I mean, I can't disagree with anything that's said, but it just boggled my mind, I guess is what I would say. And I mean, it's difficult to say you'll get another chance to throw a perfect game. There's only been 26 of them, I think, in the history of a game that's been played since the middle part of the 19th century. So the statistics say no. It's unlikely he'll get another chance. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's unlikely. Statistically unlikely he'll have another shot at a perfect game. I get it. It was cold. Supposedly it wasn't his best stuff. Was good enough, obviously. I mean, I shudder to think what would have happened if he had his best stuff. Yikes!
13 strikeouts in 7 innings.
So I guess if he had his best stuff, nobody would have gotten their bat off their shoulder. I mean, I don't know what would have happened, but and like you said, I have tremendous respect for Dave Roberts. I think he's one of the best baseball men of the past 30 years. But man, I don't know. I mean, it's so hard for me to I can't even imagine the walk out there to say, hey kid, that's a great 7 innings. Go get him next time. I mean, like I
think the real kicker on this one is he's leading 7-0.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's no you give up 2, 3, 4 runs. Well, you lost your no-hitter. So I mean he was totally dominated. And when you got
utterly cruising
strikeouts. I mean, Mr. No was gonna strike out. So yeah, that's the only thing. He had a big lead and he was so dominant.
He was cruising. I mean, you would have thought it was a simulate. It looked like a preseason outing. It looked like he was in Vero Beach. He was just mowing them down effortlessly.
Yeah, it was. A lot of things came to mind when you said that, mowing them down there effortlessly.
Right.
So, but But I'm gonna talk a little NBA before we bring a Mike on and talk some NFL. But a couple things that I heard this week, and one thing that I saw that I'll talk to Mr. Scott about a little bit later. But here in California, we have two teams in the city of Los Angeles. One, the purple and gold, the Lakers. And then we have the Clippers, the kind of stepchildren, or in recent years have been the stepchildren. But this year, we have AD, who I believe has missed at least 40 games, I believe, close to 40. And we have LeBron, who's missed at least 26. And AD says, let's run back with me and LeBron again. We can get it done. But if you're talking about an 86 game season, Mr. Scott, and you have probably a total of 48 games in combo missed together, would you run back the Lakers again?
Well, I think take my talents. I mean, this being a GM and trying to play and GM and put your own people around you. I mean, let's face it, AD just seems to be injury prone. I mean, he seems to be he's on his back a lot of the times. I mean, but it's the whole big man thing now where big man wants to threes. They want to shoot threes. They don't want to be a big man. They don't want to go in and get down, play some defense, block shots, guard the rim. And he's not going to be that. And so they have to look at the makeup of their team. And right now, if Clippers get Kawhi back, and if Paul George is healthy, they own that. They'll own that city to me. If Kawhi can come back the way he's been, but no, but they don't have a lot of choice. What do they do with Westbrook with the big salary? I think he makes more than anybody. I think on the team. So they're in a bad. LeBron has put him there, and didn't take my talents. That's what I call him. Take my talents. I think he may be looking for another team. I hear rumblings he might want to go up north to play with Curry and looking for titles. I don't really think much of the Lakers at this point. The makeup of their team, they got rid of some really good role and bench players, some younger players to get Westbrook, and it just hasn't worked out.
Mr. Scott, you have been officially inducted into the SPORTSKRIB Hall of Fame. Take my talents will be a phrase that we will use from now on when we're talking about Mr. LeBron James. I take my talents. Usually I'm the one that gives out nicknames, but I'm going to steal that one from you here. That's much better than rat, birds, and clowns. Take my talents, and it fits right in because of the rivalry between Youngstown and Akron. So
yeah, it's right there.
it's right there for the picking.
It's up there with World B Flat and Flatter World Peace.
Yeah. Bill got his first one from World B Flat, and now you take my talents. Okay, Bill, what's your thoughts? You have always been.
Who could have seen this coming, James? Who could have seen this coming? Who would have known the oldest team in the league would break down? Who could have seen that coming?
And now you want to do it again?
As I said as you know, multiple times heading before the season began. I told you what was going to happen. I said that they have a bunch of old players that will break down physically as the season goes along.
And they
And
broke down quicker than I did with this 75-year-old body.
so I must say I get no pleasure from having been 100% correct about how this season played out, but it played out exactly as I said it would. And I mean, they could run it back if they want to, if they can still run. I think that they have some decisions to make, and a bunch of their players obviously have played their best basketball already, right? I mean, that's not really debatable in my mind. Some of their most expensive players, in fact, have played their best basketball. You don't want the best players, well, the players who are supposed to be the best players in your team and the most well compensated players in your team to be players that can no longer finish the season. And when they do play, in the cases of some of them, don't play like elite players anymore. They've painted themselves into quite the corner here, James. I mean, they've got a bunch of, because it's easy to talk about wanting to move these players, but have you seen the contracts? Have you seen the contracts? Move them how?
Not just that, but when you think about the team, Russell Westbrook is not even the best sixth man on the team.
But James, maybe taking my talents is going to bring in.
Booby.
Get ready for this. Maybe he's going to bring in. I'm going to the league. I'm going to the league. Maybe he's going to bring in. I'm going to the league.
I think this is something else that we should possibly discuss, because do you really think that when you look at, and maybe you guys haven't looked at a lot of tape, of Booby, LeBron's young son,
Bronny.
I don't see LeBron Jr. I see Booby. I mean, good young kid, good basketball, but I mean, is he better than the ball boys when they first came out? I mean,
well, he's a different kind of player, but I mean, that's not the. We all know, as it says in the book, right, that you look to the hills from whence your help will come, but their help isn't coming from the hills. They're going to their help, if it comes from anywhere, will be from, I don't know, maybe some people retiring. I mean, they've got to blow this thing up. I mean, I'm sorry, this is not. You're not going to slap a coat of paint on this one, right? It's not. This isn't going to fly. They are in a bad situation. And if they could somehow get out from under both AD's and Westbrook's contract, I mean, that would give them a chance to do a bunch of things they need to do. But you can't get out from under those contracts. I mean, people throw around, trade so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. No. Look at the contracts. How can you do that? You'd have to convince a team. I don't know, hypnosis? I mean, what would you do?
Well, they had a shot. What? Give us your first round draft pick in 2027 or whenever the hell it was. Plus, but I mean, they might as well have. What are they? The future of the Lakers right now until 2027 looks very bleak. And then you look at the coaches that they want to bring in. Do you really think that Jason Kidd is going to leave the Dallas Mavericks to come and coach the Lakers? Really?
Because if he manages to get 38 wins, he should be coach of the year. I guess that'd be the other reason to do it, so he can be the first guy to win coach of the year with 38 wins. I mean, this is bad. I mean, like,
Luka Doncic is 24 years old, 23. I mean, really, Now, Mr. Scott, I do have a bone to pick with you because there's a guy that plays for the Minnesota Timberwolves that I have absolutely the most respect for his game until he gets to the playoffs. Mr. Scott, what happened to Cat during the play-in? I mean, you know, the foolish fouls. I don't. y- Some of those you can't blame on coach. I mean, it was just like his head was not in the game. What would I know? What was your thoughts watching that playoff game, Mister Scott?
Well, the Wolves won. Team won. They won.
Yes.
And Cat, he was just doing things that he's been doing during the year, and they weren't letting him get away with it.
There you go.
Hooking people, elbowing people. I mean, that's been part of his game. And he really is enamored with throwing up 3-pointers. I mean, he's really enamored since he won the 3-point
The three
competition.
point.
So he's just enamored with that instead of. And then you see, Vanderbilt and those guys, they're doing the dirty work. They're getting in there and doing what they need to do to guard that basket and make plays. And I don't know, maybe he's got this Hollywood girlfriend and she was there and, he was embracing her after, So I hope that that's an anomaly of a game for him because usually he does play much better than that. He does a lot more things. A good passer. He likes to drive to the basket, but he's not a center for one. And so they have to have right matchups out there. Vanderbilt, he does the dirty work, but he's undersized. He's not as talented as the people he's going against, but he gives it everything, and he's effective. He has his moments. So I just think Towns, this is the playoffs. You're not going to get away with all this hooking people and running over people, and even though they were at home. So we'll see what happens when they go on the road. But he's got to pick it up. He's got to get back to doing what we've seen him do.
Now, there was a lot of criticism about the celebration, but I didn't have any problem with the celebration because I will admit I'm one of those Patrick Beverly guys when it comes to sports. Anytime I get a chance to stick it to you, I'm the one. I'm gonna pull the scab off. I'm gonna do everything possible. From poking you in the eye, whatever I have to do to win. So I have no problem with Patrick Beverly. And plus the fact, you traded me. You traded me. Mr. Scott, if you weren't impressed with Cat, you got to be impressed with Patrick Beverly.
Yeah, I mean, he showed grit, leadership. I mean, he really, his emotion carried the team. I mean, really, he was on fire the whole way. He wanted that game, and I think he pulled some of the other guys in. What happened with Cat? I mean, D'Angelo Russell played a wonderful game. I mean, he played one of the best games I've seen him play all year. Anthony Edwards, I tell you, I've been just surprised by him, as young as he is, and how he can really. He has no fear. He gets in and does his thing. He has games where you don't see him for whatever reason, but I think this playoffs, the Timberwolves got a chance to make some noise against who do they play? Is it Cleveland? No,
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 they'll be
Memphis.
playing.
They play
They'll be
Memphis.
playing Memphis.
They play Memphis. So Memphis is a young team. Cat does his thing. I like the matchup. I like the matchup with Memphis and the celebration. I think you could, I mean, it was nice. The fans were really into it, but it's nice to, okay, we won. Now let's go get the next one. Okay, this we just and this whole playing thing to me. See that ninth and 10th teams. I got a cousin down in Atlanta. Oh, he calls me. He's at the game, and we're gonna do this and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, teams are ninth and 10th for a reason. I mean, ninth and 10th teams are not really projected to get all the way and win the title. Oh no, but we so much better. We were so in the thing last year, and but we're gonna go ahead. No, I think they're playing Cleveland. I think that's what it was. I think Atlanta is playing Cleveland, and they may be one of the better bottom tier teams. But to me, you're ninth and 10th. I mean, that's the chances of you getting up into the championship area is pretty slim to me. But I do like the Timberwolves' chance in the next round.
Uh, Another team that's of course, we've got this matchup in mind. Now all of a sudden, we're talking about Ben Simmons back in possibly Game 4, but guys, the Nets against the Celtics. Now the Celtics, you talk about a team that's been on fire. I mean, Marcus Smart, Tatum, all those guys have stepped up their game. Smart is playing exceptional defense also. Uh, but, uh, everyone is expecting Durant and Kyrie to, I don't want to say blow them out, but, it's all. I think that the phrase that I heard this morning was the best big man in the game and the best little closer in the game, meaning Kyrie. But Bill, who do you have in this series? The Celtics or the Nets?
Yeah, this is a tough one. As I've said many times, I resisted embracing the Nets. I guess we're going to put it for a very long time. I do think that they are potentially the better team, especially when they are relatively healthy and everyone's playing well. I don't know. This is a tough one. I'm going to take the Nets as much as I hate to do it. I don't enjoy it. I don't feel good about it, but I'm doing it. Probably will regret it later. In fact, I regret it now. I'm regret it already. But I've done it anyway.
Who you got, Mr. Scott? The Celtics or the Nets?
I just think in the playoffs when you got these people that are the guy, Kevin Garnett, Kevin Durant. When you got the guy, I mean, in those kind of series, I think Kyrie, boy, he's been kind of erratic to me. Great player now. That's a nice tandem. But I would really like him if they still had the beard. I mean, then I wouldn't even question it. And then I don't know why you would trade the beard for somebody that doesn't want to play. And they're saying that Simmons may come back. Well, he hasn't played all year. He doesn't want to play. He doesn't want to play. I wouldn't even think about bringing him back in this kind of a thing. But what? He doesn't want to play. Sits on the bench. These are weird outfits. Something's wrong there. Something is wrong there to me. So, yeah, I have to go with the Nets because of Durant. I mean, I just think when you got the guy, one of those guys, and this is an earlier round, even though I like Boston, they're young. They've had a great season, and there's probably a lot of big things happening for them coming up. But I'm going to stick with, I think Durant would like to win another one on another team. And I think that's where I'm going.
Well, now, since you mentioned the beard, Mr. Scott, who is the most, who would you consider the most, let's see how I want to put this, because Joel Embiid is the most valuable player on the 76ers. But right now, considering their play, who do you consider the second most valuable player on the team? Tobias Harris or the beard?
That's kind of a toss-up to me. It depends on which beard you get. We haven't really seen the Beard seems, seems to be getting kind of hip hop, hanging out with some of the stars, and my thoughts on that. I'm not going to delve into it right now, but and I think that's, I don't know that he's all the way. And his conditioning. I mean, people have really questioned how hard he's really working towards these playoffs and being that guy that he was. So, Tobias Harris, I mean, he brings it. I mean, he brings it, and Embiid, he brings it. So if the Beard decides, this is his chance to get a title, it will. So we'll see. But the Beard, I'm kind of flopping a little bit on the Beard now.
Uh, what's your thoughts on the play of the Beard since he's left the Nets, Bill?
Well, as you know, this is one of my favorite subjects in the whole wide world. As I've said consistently for, I don't know, however long I've been on the Sports Crib, I will never, ever, ever pick a team where he is the engine that makes that team go to win it all. And I stick by that. I believe that his effort or lack thereof on the other end, well, I'm sure he thinks of it as the other end of the court, is very clear that he doesn't have a full interest in being an all-around player. He is one of the great, clever scorers in the history of the game, right? I mean, when you think about people who don't win through pure athletic ability, he's on a short list with, the Rick Barrys and the, Adrian Dantleys. I mean, the great non-athlete scorers. I say non-athlete, but you know what I mean. Guys who have
dribbles.
to
6 steps, no
right.
dribbles.
Right. Guys who have to figure out another way to beat you. And I can admire and be aware of his level of skill. And like I said, what a clever sort of scorer he is, and still not like or believe in him and not enjoy watching him play, despite being very much aware of his greatness. And that's where I am with him. That's where I've been with him. And I don't think I'm ever going to budge off of that. I certainly think they're capable of winning a playoff series. Possibly two, but I don't quite buy that. So yeah, I guess I would say they're capable of winning a playoff series, and two isn't out of the question, but I wouldn't bet on it.
Bill, Suns coach Monty Williams, he's voted Coach of the Year by his peers once again. Your thoughts? Is Monty the man?
Another delightful feel-old moment. I remember watching when his Calvert Hall team came up to play when he was in high school, right? He was probably 16, 17 years old. But I remember watching him. They came to Virginia from Calvert Hall in Maryland and played Maury High School and some of the other sort of powerhouse high schools in Virginia in a tournament at the Scope Auditorium. And so... yes, it feels very strange to me to think about him being a well-established now NBA coach. Of course, he had a shortened NBA career due to injury, so that's part of why he got into coaching so early. But he's a very deserving candidate. He's a terrific young coach, a very high basketball IQ, relates to players well. I don't think it's his last time. I mean, I think he's going to be one of those guys that, if he coaches long enough, has a chance to be a Hall of Famer.
What are your thoughts on Mr. Monty Williams there, Mr. Scott?
He's doing a good job. Time will tell, but these playoffs are probably going to be pretty big for his rep in where he goes. But I think he's done a great job, and I like him. I like what I see.
What about the Suns? Do you like what you see in the Suns? Are they the number one team in the West?
Oh, by far. I mean, when you look at the record, I mean, they've ran away from everybody. Now Chris Paul, he has really, he's kind of fun to watch for me now. My brother doesn't think that much of him for some reason. But I mean, because he's so dangerous passing the ball, he gets in the paint and everybody's guarding people, and he looks around for somebody to pass to, and they say, "Oh, okay, everybody's guarded. I'll just pop the two in." I mean, everybody's watching for him to get rid of the ball, and nobody's around him. He says, "Okay, you want me to take it? No problem." Boom. And so, if he stays healthy, I don't think there's any reason they shouldn't get the championship. He stays healthy through the whole thing. He leads the team. They seem to really, rally around him, and his game is, these assists. He handles that ball, and he makes those little. He's not trying to shoot threes. He's getting in the paint, and those easy shots are there, and he can nail them. So as long as he stays healthy, which is it going to be a question? That's going to be a question because he seems to always walk like he's got neuropathy or something, like there's something wrong with his knee or something. But but yeah, I think they should be the odds on favorite.
You've been down on the Nets, Bill, but you've always been up on the Suns.
Yep.
Uh,
I think they're the best team in the league, and I mean, I don't see why. If you once again said pick your two teams that'll be in the finals now, and you made me pick right now, I would have the Suns and the Bucks in. So, I mean, they're a complete team. First of all, right? Their best players, with the exception of Chris Paul, are in their physical primes. They can score from multiple parts of the floor. They have an elite level player in. Well, I mean, Chris Paul's still a great player, but he's obviously not in his prime. But in Devin Booker, you have an elite level player who has a mid-court game. Hey, wow, who knew he could still score for them? Yeah, he can still do that. Mid-court's allowed still. He can get to the bucket and score. He can knock down threes. He can pass the ball. He's a decent playmaker. He's able to play defense. He's everything we talked earlier about, about the beard, but he's everything that the beard is, but a bunch of other things the beard is not. Better athlete, plays all over, plays defense, sets plays up for other people. Just a great all-around young player. This should not be their last trip. If they get there, this should not be the last trip to the NBA Finals. They should be able to. I mean, it's hard to repeat, but they should be a contender to get back there for the foreseeable future. I guess the next few years. I just think they're a terrific basketball team. I think they're well coached. I think they hold each other accountable. I think they care about each other, and there's no selfish players on the team, which is extremely important. And once again, I'm not going to keep harping on some of the teams we talked about earlier that have selfish players, but this one in particular is an unselfish team. So I think they have a great chance.
Okay. Well, guys, it's that time of the evening where we start talking a little NFL. I see Mr. Uh, Valverde is here. Mike, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very good. How about you guys? How's everybody doing tonight?
Oh, we're doing fine. I know you and Bill are in the midst of getting things together for your dynasty leagues, and the draft is next week. So we'll definitely be willing to pick you guys for everything. But we got a couple draft questions for you this week. But this Saturday, as you know, football is back, that being the USFL. Uh, the Birmingham Stallions against the New Jersey, who was it?
Generals?
General.
Yeah, the New Jersey Generals. Two of the storied, the original USFL teams. So there are a couple of things that are going to be different. They're not going to be using chains. Uh, they're going to have a chip in the ball, and that's going to measure your first downs. And there are a couple other rules that we might hopefully be seeing installed into the NFL game. But Mike, what do you think about this chainless game with uh, first down being determined by chipping the ball?
I think if it works, it's great. I don't see why it wouldn't. And if it does work, then the next question is why isn't the NFL using it? So I don't know about these things. Why the NFL is behind there? I mean, technologically advanced. Why don't we have chips in the ball for the goal line? I mean, you could put a little bit of camera inside the pylon, but you can't put a chip on the ball to see if he crosses the goal line. I think a lot of this is that they don't do because of drama reasons. So USFL is going to do it. It's going to work, and then we'll see how the NFL reacts. But yeah, I think it's good. I mean, why have when it's a first down? Why do we need to bring out the chains and all this other stuff? Let's just do it and get it over with.
What do you think about that, Mr. Scott?
I wasn't sure that they were going to have football. Summer football has always been kind of a iffy kind of a thing. And then New Jersey Generals, Washington Generals. I don't know what to think about. I remember years and years ago, I happened to be in Orlando, and a guy took me to a training camp must have been the New Jersey Generals. They must have been, because it was Herschel Walker and
Yep.
Brian Sipe,
Yep.
quarterback, and I mean they had a bunch of good players, but they were practicing at a public park. They were practicing at a park somewhere in Orlando. So do they have a TV contract?
Yes.
Yes, they do. Yes, sir. It'll be there.
I mean, is it going to be an accessible place, or is it going to be
Fox? Fox Sports.
It's going to be on Fox, not on like YouTube or nothing like that.
No.
Not ESPN Ocho.
No, it's going to be on Fox. They have a very lucrative TV contract. And if all they have to do basically is to get through the year, and they get renewed.
Well, these other teams have tried it. I mean, XFL and some guy. What was that guy? He hate me, and some of these kind of people.
Oh, Rod Smart. He hate me.
He hate me not. Yeah. I mean,
that's coming back too. XFL's coming back too. So we're going to have USFL and XFL shortly.
Well, if there's enough room, I'll watch it, but I'm not. Like I say, New Jersey Generals, Washington Generals. I mean, I don't know.
Bill, what's your thoughts? I mean, there's only one NFL, and once again, kind of being one of those purists. It's going to be on Saturday, so maybe that'll generate. But I don't. I'm taking a kind of wait and see attitude about this whole thing. It hasn't worked before, and I say that now because there are so many other things that take up your time nowadays, especially the younger generation. I mean, you and Mike are still, kind of, on that cusp. But do you see in your different dealings with the different fantasy leagues and stuff like that? Do you find now that where fantasy used to be like the 28 to 35-year-old group, now it's progressed a little bit to maybe it's the 35-year-old group, and maybe even a little older, the guys that are more, as Demetrius likes to say, the old man with the black socks kicking the kids off his lawn.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's getting older and getting younger. There's 15-year-olds with fantasy football podcasts. I mean, so it's not just getting older; it's also getting younger. There are fantasy American style fantasy football, like in all across Great Britain, Australia. I mean, so there's there's a lot that has happened in the fantasy football community, and Mike's been in it much longer than I have, but in the last few years, and one is the proliferation of alternate, just the old classic redraft, old standard scoring. You've got half point PPR, you've got whole point PPR, probably a few people doing 0.75. I don't know. You've got dynasty. You've got what do you call it? The other thing, the one that's like dynasty, but it's not quite dynasty. You've got
Oh, you mean like keepers, where you can keep
right, keeper, which is right, dynasty and keeper. You've got full on college football. In fact, I won. I won it. I won in my first year of playing college fantasy football. Won the league. So yeah, there's more opportunities to be involved in fantasy football than ever before, and more different kinds of ways to be involved in fantasy football than ever before. So, I mean, one of the healthiest growing sports in America, if you want to call it sport, or for growing activities in America, is fantasy football. It's gone from being something that was just hardcore football nerds doing it, 15 and more years ago, and now, literally there's leagues of grannies. I mean, you know what I mean? Like it's one of the most accessible things for people that some of them want to learn the game better. That's one why some of them do it, but some just do it because it's a thing to do. Everyone at their job is doing it. Everyone at the church is doing it. Whatever, right? Their social group is all doing it. So it's like, what the heck? I'll try it too. I think I started playing in 2008 or 9 or something like that. And I was initially sort of resistant. And I thought it would reduce my ability to just enjoy the game. And it did the exact opposite. I enjoyed the game more than ever before. I always knew the players well. Now I know the players well, but in a different way. I don't know. I mean, I don't understand why anyone would ever be. I think it's a net gain is happening across all age groups. I mean, I've seen some, numbers from like NDOR, NPOR, whatever, National Opinion Research Center, and some of these other places, essentially saying it's one of the faster growing sports related, I guess, activities in America. And now you've got fantasy everything. If you've got, I mean, name a sport, right? There's a fantasy league for everything.
What's your thoughts on it?
I just got a text from somebody. I don't know if this is true or not. It might be a joke, but it says Donald Trump just hired Herschel Walker as head coach and GM for New Jersey.
Well, Donald Trump does not own the USL football team. That was part of the problems before.
Okay, so maybe that was just.
Mike, what's your thoughts on the fantasy business and the effect with all of these new fantasy these new leagues, like you said, USFL. Now we have the USFL, the XFL.
I think it keeps people interested, especially in redraft leagues that so their season's over and now you have something that you could almost continuously play if you can get into an XFL league or USFL league and just sort of keep that interest going. I don't think it's going to deter anybody that is a dynasty, or unless they just want to have fun, they do it both. But yeah, I don't think it's a threat to anything. But I do think this gives it another option for those that, their season ends in December, January now, and now you have this. So, and this can go right back into the football season for, when you start in August, September, whatever. So I think it's good for that.
Tragedy this week. Dwayne Haskins loses his life in a tragic. Got hit by a truck. Mike, what's your thoughts on Mr. Haskins, his career from Ohio State? down to the present?
I think, I mean, I'm going to reserve negative thoughts, especially because he's passed. So I'm going to talk positively on him, which a lot of people who have very high profile jobs kind of struggled with, which is kind of dubious to me and, is strange. But he was a great athlete at Ohio State. And he's one of those that the skills weren't necessarily at the elite level, but he was good enough because he had the heart to play and was always going 150%, and always giving all that effort. And that's what's translated in him going from like a third round draft pick to a first round pick eventually with the Washington, what are they, the Commanders now? It's that heart. And he always did great things for the community, either even was in Washington or Pittsburgh. And it's unfortunate that one of the last videos that we see of him, I think was the day before, where he's hanging out with Najee Harris, the running back, and they're just getting along and having great times. And he goes to Florida to work on his game with Mitchell Trubisky, and he's just a great guy as far as what I know. And it's sad. I mean, anytime someone like that dies, especially at a very young age, it's disheartening. So, I wish the best for his family and through this time. But it's one of those things where you just don't want it to happen.
Mr. Scott, your thoughts on the passing of the young man, just 24 years of age, cut down prime of his career in a tragic accident?
Yeah, it's and the circumstances are kind of clouded on the freeway. Why I don't, and then I guess what comes to mind really is that for some reason, Ohio State's always a great program. I mean, they have a great top program year after year. But I don't recall many of their quarterbacks transferring into the NFL and really making really making a long-term type of a splash with the team and really seems like they had several players that have been quarterbacks that have been really good at Ohio State, and the team's always good. So well coached, one of the most talented teams, them and Alabama every year. They're going to be up there among the top teams. But saying that, I don't know much about the gentleman's career. I know he was drafted high and there were high hopes. But there's something about the Ohio State quarterbacks, and maybe others can comment on that more than I can. They just haven't seemed to really transfer that type of things they've showed in college to the NFL.
Yeah, that's I would say for the most part, and I've been watching Ohio State quarterbacks for quite some time. That's definitely true. But Bill, how do we
Yeah. Well,
celebrate the young man's life and career?
Yeah, well, DHA Simba, right, as he was known. I remember talking about him with my friend Donovan James when he was coming up through Elite 11 and things like that. And when he committed to Ohio State, was as always was a juggernaut program and everything like that. And there are people predicting that he was never going to end up starting there because he was initially a third stringer. They had another 5-star. He was a 4-star. They had a 5-star coming in behind him named Tate Martell that everyone was predicting was going to take the job from him. And I told everybody who would listen, no, Haskins going to keep the job. Martell is never going to come close to beating him out. But amongst the quarterbacks, speaking of Ohio State quarterbacks, Scott, that Mr. DHA Simba, a.k.a. Dwayne Haskins, beat out was somebody named Joe Burrow. You may have heard of him. He's been okay. He's worked out. But he couldn't take the job from him. That's another guy that was competing for that starting job at Ohio State that Haskins held on to. And Burrow transferred, in fact, due to the fact that he couldn't beat out Haskins for one of the reasons he couldn't beat out Haskins for the job. He came out as a redshirt sophomore, and there's, I won't say curse, but I mean, unless you want to count some asterisk guys, there's only really been one really, really great, as in Hall of Fame level great redshirt sophomore quarterback coming out early, and once again, early in quotes, because he spent 3 years as a naval officer in the Pacific Theater, and that's Norm Van Brocklin. So technically speaking, Norm Van Brocklin was a redshirt sophomore when he declared for the NFL draft, but he was like 24 going on 25 at the time, and like I said, had been a naval intelligence officer. But the others, Michael Vick, I guess, is the second most successful, but the others, including Jonathan Paul Manziel and Tommy Maddox and, a long list of others, it hasn't tended to work out. And of course, there were some very insensitive things said by people like Gil Brandt, who I normally have a tremendous amount of respect for, but that rather tasteless comment was made. And then Adam Schefter, I know he's a Michigan man. I understand the rivalry and everything, but yeah, that's not the place or the time.
No, yeah, that was horrible.
Yeah, that's not the place, not the time.
Gil Brandt was worse, but yeah, both of them should not have been said.
Right, Brandt was even worse.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm a Steeler fan, and everybody knows how I felt about but this is not the time to talk about.
Not the place, not the time.
Right.
So here's what I will say: this young man from Maryland, who, for basically from his childhood onward, dreamed of being the Ohio State quarterback. Right? We've all seen the video of him saying, "One day I want to come here and go to college, and play quarterback here," and he was right. I do believe he was in the process of turning it around. I think he was going to, even if not with the Steelers, establish himself and get back to being a starter again. He was rather immature initially. I think anyone who really paid attention would agree with that. But it wasn't malicious. It wasn't. His teammates loved him. He was a player that coaches still thought there was a lot to work with. Nobody was giving up on him. Nobody was like, yeah, this isn't a guy we can work with. Everybody said, yeah, we think it can happen with him. So it is, it's tragic anyway, because a young man in the, what should be the best part of his life loses his life. But from a purely football standpoint, I do believe he was going to get another bite at the apple to be an NFL starting quarterback somewhere for somebody. And I think he would have maximized his next opportunity to do so. So rest in peace, Dwayne Haskins.
Bill, a young man that is, I don't want to say he's full of himself, but he's willing to bet on himself. And his name is Aleem Glass. Akil Glass. I hadn't really heard a lot about him, but he says that he's the best quarterback prospect in the class. Hey, you and I'm sure you and Bill, you and Mike have researched this young man.
I've done more than research. I've met him, I've talked to him.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, so I've been on him for about 3 years. Because of the COVID year, he's coming out older. He's almost 24 now, so that's another thing. Some teams have age guardrails or guidelines, whatever term we're going to use. So he'll be pushed down the board, but somewhere day 3, probably late day 3, somebody's going to take a shot at him. The young man is almost 6'4". He's about 232 pounds. He has a very strong arm. He has a high football IQ. He's been very productive. In the COVID very shortened year, he was one of the leading passers in both percentage and efficiency in all of FCS, and comes back and basically replicates it, but over a whole season in this last regular normal, whatever term we're going to use, year, where it was a full season. And he's worked very hard. He still has some things to tighten up, like most college quarterbacks. The offense he comes from, he's not doing everything that he'll be asked to do at the next level. He's working on learning how to call protections. I've talked to him about what he's working on and, things he wants to work on. He's gotten his body in better shape for a long time. He was, he wasn't out of shape, but he was in, college football shape. He's trying to get in pro football shape. He's trying to drop his body fat, get leaner. He's not an athlete exactly. He's, a classic pocket passer, but he's trying to be working on his feet, working on syncing up, his lower half and his top half. When he does do that, he's got a very live arm. Probably one of the top 6 or so arms in this entire class. And if it weren't for the fact that he was at a SWAC school, I think more people would be talking about him. And the other thing, like I said, is obviously the extra, time that he spent has allowed him to keep developing, but also has pushed him down the board for teams that like younger players. But I've been on Akil Glass for 3 years. I think he's going to, worst case scenario, be an NFL backup.
Where's he on your draft board, Mike?
I think he's a 7th rounder UDFA kind of guy. I think he's one of those that will make a team, especially in an RPO kind of heavy system, maybe like Carolina that needs a backup, and he would be sort of maybe practice squad and see if he can move up kind of player. Very much a team leader. I like his decisions. He'll see defensive backs like bite, and he'll take advantage of that. So, he's good, but he's like Bill said. I'm not going to kill the guy, but he's very limited as well. So, he's good enough to be on a team. Now, whether that's going to be practice squad or move up, we'll see. But 7th round UDFA kind of guy. He'll get a call. There's no doubt about it.
Mike, do you think that Daryl Stingley Jr. is a top 10 draft pick?
I think it's close. I have him, I think, like at 14. So to answer your question, no, but I certainly could be wrong. He's definitely in that 10 to 14 area for sure.
Bill, where do you have Daryl Stingley Jr.?
I can tell you that not every team, but a bunch of NFL teams like him better than Mike does. I'll let you know that. There's a pretty good chance he goes in the top 6. There's at least 2 teams that have him in their top 4. So it all depends on what happens. Yes, you could. Wow is right. There's some teams who absolutely love it. And one of them rhymes with Mets, in case you're wondering. There's a team that absolutely loves him. They have 2 players they absolutely love, and there's going to be a fight basically in the draft room if both those guys are available. But if the other one's gone, don't be surprised if you see Daryl Stingley going at that early. But yes, if he doesn't go that early, he could slide down a little bit.
Do you think he's going to go over like Sauce Gardner? And
this is the fascinating thing. There are some teams that like Sauce over Stingley. There's some teams that like Stingley over Sauce. And it comes down to what do you want to do? Sauce can do anything, basically, right? He can, in terms of the kind of corner he is, he can do man, he can do zone. If you want to press, he can press. If you want to bump and bail, but Stingley is your classic old school Mike Haynes style. I'm gonna follow you from the time you come off the field until the time you get back on the bus to go to the hotel. He is a classic old school man. We all watch the practice reps where he and Jamar Chase are going at it. There's a handful of human beings on the planet who can do what Stingley did as a freshman against Jamar Chase. The knock on him obviously is the last 2 seasons, right? There were teams that might have, if he were able to be in that draft, there were some teams that had him as the number 1 prospect in the country, right? And then a combination of injuries and, I'll be honest, I think playing not to get hurt, ended up getting some people sort of cooling on him a little bit. But the Liz Frank injury is recovering nicely. He ran 240s, one at 4.37 and one at 4.44 at his pro day. He 38.5-inch vertical. He's maybe he's not 100%, but he's at least a good solid 92.5% back. And if he continues to get healthier, we're talking about, an elite level athlete who, when he's right and motivated, is 100% capable of absolutely being one of the best players in the whole class. And so, yes, there are teams in the top 10 that will consider him. And there's some teams that, as Mike said, have him more like 13, 14.
Is he the grandson of Daryl Stingley?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Of Daryl Stingley, graduate of Marshall High School, John Marshall High School here in west side of Chicago.
Mr. Scott, Cam decided that he wanted to open his mouth this week, and do you think that Cam has effectively talked his way out of the NFL, considering, we just talked last week about the role of women, being increased in the NFL, being part of the Rooney Rule, and now he tells them basically, barefoot pregnant, be quiet and learn to cook.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think he played his way out, and then he kind of seals the deal now with his performance and these comments. I mean, I don't even, he doesn't even have a team now, does he? I mean, isn't he a free agent?
He's the free agent.
Yeah. And so you think that he would be really kind of focused on if he wants to play. I think he'd like to go back to Carolina, but they haven't made any gestures to get him. So yeah, the comments, something about his towel wearing and wearing towels, and he brings the kind of attention to him. I mean, all those things. Well, not the comment about women. That's off limits. But the dress, all the things he's doing distracts from him being a football player. And he's now become, what kind of football player is he now? I mean, offensively passing, but it doesn't seem to be part of his game anymore. And as you get older, you're going to be a running quarterback. That just doesn't seem to go along with the territory at this stage of his career. So would somebody pick him up? He's had chances. I mean, he was in New England. He's had some chance. He went back to Carolina. I think he could be at about the end of, unless somebody's really desperate and he wants to be a backup. I don't know how he sees himself. I don't know how that he really sees himself. He's kind of a flamboyant guy. So I wouldn't touch him personally. I think he's kind of had his day.
Bill, has Cam played his last days in the NFL?
The reason I'm not going to say absolutely no is, as was said, he plays quarterback, and there's only so many people in the world, once again, who can do that. If he's still seen even as a backup, as a high-level backup, there'll be somebody who will place a call. The question is, the biggest thing Mr. Scott pointed up is, even though he's not old, he's aged somewhat prematurely because he took hits that other quarterbacks didn't take. He was playing power, basically power running. He was a power runner. Yeah. People talk about running quarterbacks. If you're Michael Vick and you run like Michael Vick, or you're Lamar, Jackson, you run like Lamar Jackson, or even Russell Wilson, that's very different from what Cam was doing. Cam was a guy who at the 3-yard line, they would load up and run quarterback power, and he would run straight into linebackers, like many times, right? He was the short yardage goal. He was the primary short yardage and goal line guy for the Panthers. So, and then he got hit in the pocket. I mean, forget the running part. He got hit in the pocket for whatever reason in a way that other quarterbacks didn't, and didn't get flags. He wasn't able to draw flags. If you look really hard at Thomas Edward Patrick Brady, there might be a flag. But people would get a full-on running start and run into the lower spine, like the lower back of Cam Newton after the ball's gone. It was a play on. Like, nothing's happening. I don't want to believe it had to do with race. I think it maybe had to do with how big and strong he is. I don't know. But for whatever reason, he couldn't get calls for nothing. So
kind of like a Shaq.
Right. So he's taken a lot of hits. And you mentioned, the passing. That's because his shoulder was hurt. He was playing with a bad shoulder. And that's why his passing fell apart. I don't know if he's 100% healthy now. And frankly, I don't know if he'll ever be 100% healthy. That's, of course, the big question. But if there's a team that's familiar with him already. Maybe he's played for one of the people on the coaching staff before already, and they have an injury at the position. I mean, the Rolodex only has so many names in it. You know what I mean? It's not like you're not calling Brett Favre anymore. I mean, it's a short list of dudes that you're calling in these emergency situations. He's on that short list, Mr. Scott. Let me inform you of that. He's on that short list of guys that you will call if, I mean, Drew Brees still gets calls, also, in case you're wondering. And until about a year ago, Tony Romo used to occasionally still get calls. Hey, Tony, you got the itch, you know? There's a small number of people that can play NFL quarterback. And so if you show you can do it at a reasonably high level, they will keep calling you until you've proven you can't do it anymore.
Mike, it's very interesting. If Bill had been a lawyer, we would have the CTE defense along with, let's see, he's just too big to get a call defense. But you know, in spite of all that, you know, can we just chalk up his remarks to head injuries and stupidity?
No, he's done this before. He did it with a reporter. I can't remember exactly what his comments were, but they were pretty misogynistic.
When she asked him about running routes, and remember the woman asked him
she brought up a specific route concept, and he giggled and didn't answer a question.
Right.
And then he said, "I just think it's funny to hear a female talk about route concepts."
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you would like to hope it was CTE, but 2 times now, yeah, I don't. Yeah, he's pretty misogynistic, especially just the words he's using, dropping, you know, bitch, and just. I mean, you don't use those words unless you have some kind of like disdain towards women, you know, and yeah, I think his days are done as a quarterback. They might bring him back to use him in goal line situations where he can throw 5 yards or run it in for an end zone touchdown. But he was done 2 years ago. He was definitely done last year when PJ Walker was, you know, put in place of him. So I think he's definitely done now.
Speaking of someone that is done, or at least right now his status is questionable, but it seems like Baker is becoming quite a podcaster here. His latest is let's see, he was on You Never Know podcast, and he feels that he was disrespected in Cleveland, and he's looking for stabilization wherever he goes. Do you think that Baker, barring an injury, will be a starter for any team week 1, Mike?
I think it's going to be interesting. I'm going to say yes, just because teams lose quarterbacks during the preseason, and he'll be one of the top of the guys that they'll call. So he's definitely, as far as, you know, players out there, Jimmy Garoppolo, I don't know. We'll see what happens with him, but Baker Mayfield is one of those that they'll immediately call as soon as something should happen. If he doesn't go before a quarterback gets hurt to somewhere, we shall see. But yes, I do think he'll be a starting quarterback by week 1.
Mr. Scott, anybody in Vikings calling Baker?
Well, if he wants to be a backup at that type of pay, yeah. But, you know, because the Vikings really haven't had much of backup quarterbacks in the last several years. Sean Mannion, and I think they have a guy that went to Washington for a while that had some moments.
They have Kellen Mond there too.
Yeah, they have Kellen Mond, who was really disrespected by the prior coach the last game of the season. They said, "Why don't you play him?" And Zimmer's like, "Oh, I've seen him play. I've already seen enough of him."
I've seen that.
And so that was not a ringing endorsement.
No.
So we don't know much about Kellen Mond. He's did line the backup. They was a Sean Mannion,
Mhm.
I think. I think he's still
Yep.
there. But who's the one that went to Washington? Who's the guy that played at Washington?
University of Washington. Is that what you're talking about?
No, no. They're now
Oh, you're talking about
Redskins.
Case
Cam
Keenum?
Allen.
Is Case
No,
Keenum?
not Case. God, what was his name? He was doing very well there. But the Vikings had him for a while. So no, I don't know what Baker. He may end up in Cleveland. I mean, they say that Watson may have to sit out, even though I don't think he should, since he's already been sitting out. But his legal problems still seem to have him tangled up.
Yep.
So
Yeah, he still got 22 civil suits against him. I mean, uh,
Jeez.
and you do have Brissett that was brought in by Cleveland to be Watson's backup. So I mean, uh, I think a lot of teams, Bill, you think a lot of teams are just waiting for Cleveland to cut him, or can Cleveland afford to cut him?
Teams are hoping they'll end up cutting him. If you're Seattle, you're just hoping against hope that they cut him. Not that they, I mean, how do I explain this? They'll go to war with Drew Lock if they have to, but they would much prefer to be able to trot out. I mean, say what you want about Baker Mayfield. He's a much better option than Drew Lock. So, in fairness to Drew Lock, who obviously is still young and developing and things like that, but at this moment in time, the better option is still Baker Mayfield. But yeah, there's some other teams that would be interested, but that's the team that I know would be most interested, I guess. the one that is wishing the hardest for him to become available is the Seahawks.
There was an interesting article, and I'm not sure how many of you saw it, but Floyd Mayweather made a proposal to any NFL team that would care to take it up. And the proposal went something like this: if any NFL team signed AB for $20 million, Floyd would be willing to pay the $20 million if, well, there's a couple caveats. The first is that if AB made it through the whole season without any trouble, that Floyd would get his $20 million back. The second part of that being that if AB got cut for reasons of conduct, Floyd would pay the team that $20 million. Mr. Scott, do you see any team taking up Floyd Mayweather's proposal?
No, I wouldn't take no bet with Floyd. They said he didn't pay the Jake Paul guy. They said that guy never got his money. So no, I wouldn't take no bet with Floyd. I guess he does a lot of betting in Vegas, and Floyd, no, that's ridiculous. I wouldn't bet with Floyd. You'd have to catch him to get your money. I don't know.
Mike?
I think it's interesting. I really like the way Floyd Mayweather's mind works. He's very good at marketing, and it's very interesting. But no team is going to do this. They're just going to be like, thanks, okay, cool, and yeah, move on. No, no.
First of all, I think you have to find an NFL team that's willing to pay AB $20 million, but that's a different
right.
That's a different conversation. Bill, You're a man of logic, an officer, and a gentleman. Do you see anybody? Do
And,
you see anybody take
and more to the point, I actually know how the salary cap regulations work. You couldn't do it. I mean, like even if you wanted to, you couldn't. It's clearly an attempt to circumvent the salary cap. You're not allowed to do it. Otherwise, people would be doing it all left and right. You'd have oil billionaires and sheiks and whoever it is doing the same thing. It's not allowed. So it doesn't matter. You can't do it.
But hey, as Mike pointed out, Floyd has always wanted to keep his name out there, make sure
Oh,
that
yes.
you know,
It's a brilliant marketing move by Floyd Money Mayweather. I mean, you can't argue that. He's up there with, I don't know, Vince McMahon, Don King. I mean, whoever. Um, but yeah, this is not a real thing, and it can't be a real thing.
um, Derek Carr, not David, got his money.
In fact, now Derek has gotten more money than David.
He just got a 3-year extension, 121 mil. Didn't say how much it was guaranteed or not, but interesting enough, it did have a no contract clause in it. What's your thought on the Raiders giving Derek an extension there, Bill?
Well, it makes sense. If you've learned nothing else about the quarterback market, it doesn't go down. If you wait later, you won't be paying him less. Just in case you're wondering, you don't get discounts later on top level quarterbacks. The price goes always up. So if you tried to make the same deal a year later, you would have been paying another 8, 9, 10, 11 million, maybe more. What did the Cowboys learn about deciding to wait one more year with Dak, right? They paid way, way more. I think it ended up costing them something like 14 point something million dollars. So if you like a quarterback, sign them. And if you really like them, extend them. That's if you've learned nothing else from all of the things you've watched with the quarterback market, this is the deal you're making now is better than the deal you would have made later, right? If you're not sure on this player, then just move on. But the whole let's see, and let's push it down the road thing always ends up costing you money. If you like the player, this is your guy, pay your guy and pay them now, right? Front load it now. Get it out of the way now, because now, year from now, 2 years from now, you now have freed up the ability to now do more things in terms of building a roster. If you kick the can down the road and the price on this player goes up because the prices don't come down, now you've got less flexibility. You're less able to bring in other players to help your team. So it's a smart move and it's a necessary move.
Mr. Scott, what did you think about the Raiders extending Derek Carr?
I think it's a good move. He's got his receiver now. They're putting the money up. Vegas looks like a real hot market. So yeah, I think I think it's a good move. Tough division, but I mean I like him as a quarterback. He's got his receiver now, so looks like you're going to give him every chance to be successful. And Vegas is a growing sports market. I mean, the whole gambling thing looks like it's just exploding. And Vegas is going to be, obviously, it's the heart and soul of that action. So, yeah, I think it's good.
Mike, while we're talking about the Derek Carr extension, what do you think about that? And part two, after spending all that money on the offense in the offseason, what about that O-line? When are they going to start fixing that?
Yeah, that's a good question. They last year during the summer they completely got away with everybody. They just said, "See you later." It wasn't too bad considering how much they had to rebuild that offensive line. So I think they'll be adequate. As far as the deal goes with Derek, yeah, I agree. I mean, it's about time. He's definitely one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the NFL. I mean, you can't really go anywhere without hearing how bad Derek Carr is, and they're just absolutely wrong. Derek Carr is a top 10 quarterback in this league, if not better. So he absolutely deserves this contract. And hopefully now with Devontae Adams, people will start recognizing more about how good Derek Carr is in this league.
Yeah, I'm as you know, I'm one of those guys. I know you're talking about me, Mike. I can feel the knives in my back here, but uh, I've never considered Derek Carr top 10 quarterback, maybe top 15, 20 maybe. But Bill,
Okay, well, who would you put ahead of him? Who are the 10 you put, or whatever you put ahead of him?
okay, let's see. Tom Brady, Josh Allen. Um, let's see. We can going on from there. We can put Patrick
Kirk Cousins?
Mahomes.
Yep.
No, we couldn't put Kirk Cousins. Would
Nope.
definitely be there. But let's see. Keeping on going. Did I mention Josh Allen?
You already did mention Josh Allen. Yeah, you're still at 3. Keep going.
All right. Okay. Well, let's do it by division first. Let me pick, let me grab my teams here because I'm sure I can give you 10. Let me see. Okay.
Trubisky?
ESPN. Wait a minute. No. Hell no. Okay. Let's start off Buffalo Bills quarterback.
Yeah, you said Josh Allen already. You're
Okay.
still only at 3.
Okay, I'm gonna say Dak Prescott.
Okay, you're at 4.
I'm also gonna say let's see Lamar Jackson,
Okay, 5.
Joe Burrows.
Well, if you mean Joe Burrow, we'll count him.
Okay, Joe Burrow, Aaron Rodgers.
Okay.
Let's see, Matt Stafford.
Okay.
Matty Ice.
Ryan, okay.
Tom Brady.
You already got him.
You already said that.
Okay.
You already said that.
Russell Wilson.
Okay, so now you're at 10. Okay, you see that. You got to 10.
Okay.
And some of that, really, Lamar Jackson, I don't know.
Some of it was a little shaky, but we'll let him count. We'll let him go.
I'm counting my 10. Now, your 10 might be better because I'm sure Mr. Scott would put Kirk Cousins in there.
Look at the stats. Look at the stats. I'm just looking at the stats.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean the thing about the NFL as it now stands is when you have the guy that you feel like is your guy, like I said, you lock him up for basically as long as you can, and you spread the money out as much as you can. I mean, you look at what we just talked about, the Mahomes contract, and I think that's going to be sort of the template going forward. When you have your young quarterback and you feel like this is the guy, we don't care if we have to spread the money out over 20 years, right? We'll sign you to a 50-year contract with 5 voidable years on the back end so you can spread out the cap hit. But I think that's the template going forward. And I think these contracts will be 100% or close to 100% guaranteed for quarterbacks, at least for quarterbacks. I don't think you'll see it spread too far beyond quarterbacks because, well, one, the risk. I mean, there's certain positions where you just can't afford to risk handing out guaranteed contracts to collision positions, right? And they now have almost completely removed quarterbacks from the collision business. Yeah. So it's a little safer than it used to be to handle guaranteed contracts.
But Bill, what do you think that Oakland's going to do with that O line? I mean,
draft.
They're
going to draft, my friend. They're going to draft. I mean, that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to have. They don't have a first rounder, so
that's right.
So they're going to have to. But there's really, I mean, I'll help them, right? Tyler Smith, and then with the next pick, Tyler Smith from tackle from Tulsa, first round. Not first round, but first pick they have, pick 86, whatever pick it is. And then next time around, if his teammate Chris Paul is around, you pick him. If not, maybe a guy like Luka Decky, or maybe somebody like Zachary Tom, or Keelan Dyche. I mean, there's options, right? This is a pretty good draft, actually, especially on the interior offensive line. It's a very deep draft. So yes, they can fix some holes on that team in the offensive line in the draft.
Oh, and Bill, just my next question. I mean, hey, the Chargers. Would you take Herbert or Carr?
Oh, I
But
mean, that's easy. Herbert is only being a superstar. I mean, that's easy. That's not even a discussion.
So we could move possibly him down to possibly number 11.
Yeah, 11 or 12. Yeah, 11 or 12. Yeah. You can be 11 or 12. I still a little shakiness on a couple of those you had earlier. No shakiness for Herbert, but the others were a little soft. But
well, I said within the top 15, 20. So I'm kind of within that range. But speaking of the Chargers, we know they traded for Mack, and now they've signed J.C. Jackson for 5 years.
Yep.
And one of my peeves with the Chargers is that they've always had talented individuals.
Yes.
They've just never been able to put it together as a team.
Well, they also have injuries, and injuries are almost always to extremely important players at the wrong time. Right? I've talked earlier about, Phillip Rivers out there on a blown ACL playing in a playoff game. They lose Derwin James at exactly the wrong time. They lose Joey Bosa at exactly the wrong time. Austin Eckler win the exact wrong time. So they don't have as maybe the largest number of injuries, because I think the Titans actually were the team that had the most, player games lost due to injury last year. But they didn't lose Derrick Henry. They didn't lose Tannehill. They didn't lose players where everybody knows their name. They lost a lot of players, but they weren't the most important players of the team. When the Chargers lose people to injury, it's always the players where everybody knows their name. It's always their top players at their most important positions. I don't know why. I don't know what's going on with that. And of course, with Tyrod Taylor, they ended up surviving it because Justin Herbert became Justin Herbert. But when people talk about, when my friends are Chargers talk about their team being cursed, they bring stuff like that up. Like, when's the last time you heard about losing your starting quarterback minutes before a kickoff because the doctor got a little too aggressive with a pain medication needle and punctured someone's lung? Yeah. So yeah, they have a bunch of weird, fluky injuries to all the wrong people at all the wrong time.
Mr. Scott, where do you rank the Chargers in that division? The Broncos just acquiring Russell Wilson, the Chiefs, losing Tyreek Hill, the Raiders. We just talked about reloading. What do you think about? Where do you rank the Chargers in that division?
Probably at the bottom, because you got the Chiefs, the Chargers. You got the Chiefs, Denver, Vegas. I hate to say it, but that's how I see that division. The Chiefs reign, and Vegas, Denver with Wilson. Boy, that's going to be very fun to watch and see how that's going to work out, how that's going to play out. That's really going to be good. I don't know. I think you're in a little trouble. Chargers, Pittsburgh. I think they're, I think you're just going to be kind of off a cliff, James. I hate to say it, but I think you're going to be kind of, swimming upstream.
Yeah, but one thing we don't have to worry about is having Kirk Cousins for a quarterback. Mike, what do you think? Where do you rank the Chargers in that division?
I think with that division too, it's very interesting because you can say last, but you could say first too. It's really that competitive. So, I don't think the Chiefs win the division. So it's going to really come down to probably the Broncos or the Chargers or the Raiders, and whoever probably wins more the end of those division games is going to be the champion. So I'm going to say Chargers second place.
I'm going to simplify it for all of you. Healthiest. The
Healthiest is a good term.
Coming out. I mean, it's that simple.
Yes.
It's the team that has the fewest key injuries at important positions is going to be the team that comes out of there. So, team doctor might be MVP.
Yeah.
Mike, should the Bills consider drafting a running back with their top pick?
No. I think Devin Singletary is good for what they have. I mean, he's not optimal. He's not like, okay, we're gonna win with this guy, but he is good enough for what they have. If Josh Allen was a statue back there, then I would say they would need to do something more. But Josh Allen runs, and Devin Singletary is good for what he does. So I think they address the offensive line with their pick.
Mr. Scott, what do you think? Should the Bills draft a running back?
No, I agree with that. I think they got a serviceable back with the mobile quarterback. I think protect the quarterback, shore up that line. Yeah, I like Buffalo. I like Diggs. Diggs got his money. Like all the receivers seem to be. Jefferson's got to get his money now too here. So I mean that's what's coming up. And I saw that the Packers just signed Sammy Watkins.
Yep.
And so he can stay healthy, which is a big if there. It's good for the Packers. But back to Buffalo, no, I don't think so.
What's your thoughts, Bill? Should they draft a running back? Who would you draft?
Well, they will draft a running back, but it won't be early. Running backs that I think they'll be eyeing, and this is, rounds 4 and later, with people like Pierre Strong, right, from South Dakota State University, Devontae Price from Florida International University. They'll take a look also at, some of the guys that are, true running back by committee system running backs, because that's what they run. They are a committee back system, and, not everybody loves it, but love it or not, that's what they are. Sacred Heart. Right, this might even be an undrafted free agent, but Julius Chestnut from Sacred Heart is a guy that I've heard they've had some interest in. Look at the guys they brought in for visits. They brought some backs in for what they call top 30 visits. So they're clearly at least considering drafting a running back, and they should. No offense to what was just said about Devin Singletary, who is Motor, as they call him, Motor Singletary. Very ironic because he's not very fast, but he is, as was said, serviceable. Right? It's when someone called, let me ask you this, Mr. Scott. Do you think if you just gave, say, you're a musician, if you gave a performance and someone said, how was it? And they said serviceable, would you feel like, man, I can't wait to see that performance? Right? That sounds serviceable. I can't wait. Let me rush on down and stand in line to see that serviceable performance. So when someone describes something as serviceable, it doesn't mean that you're set. It doesn't mean you don't need to address it. It means that the house isn't on fire. So, yes, the house is not on fire for the running back position there for them. But they will address, and they need to address the position. And they're in luck, as we keep saying, because of the COVID year. This is a historically deep draft. If they got Rachaad White in the 4th round, woo! Now, that would be bad for Devin Singletary owners, because I think he would start to cut into his work, because he's basically the same guy but bigger, faster, and with better hands. So that's not great for Devin. But I mean, that would help them so much because he runs routes like a wide receiver. Rachaad White would revolutionize that offense. Oh my God, would they be a better team with him?
Bill, Jabril Peppers signs with the Pats. And we all know how Bill Belichick loves to put those multiple safeties up there. But what's your thoughts on Jabril going to the Pats? Good fit?
What took so long? That's what I mean, this is clearly a match, maybe not in heaven, but certainly made, someplace close. So you've got a guy who helps you in special teams, who can play either strong or free, can play the overhang defender / money backer, whatever you want to call it, position. The Jeremiah Owusu Koromoa / Tyrann Mathieu / Malcolm Jenkins position, whatever you want to call it, right? The guy that just sort of wanders around in the back half of your secondary, showing up various places. Right? He can do that. He's a good enough athlete that you can ask him to cover wide receivers. He can do it. He's tough enough and strong enough that he can come down in the box and, take on the running game and take on running backs and get them to the ground. He can cover tight ends. He's versatile, which is, stop me if you've heard this before, but the last I checked, that's probably one of the most vital things if you're going to try to run that Belichick defense, which asks people to line up in some very strange places at times. It's like you're the end man on the line of scrimmage on one down in the same series of downs, right? First down, you might be literally the end man on the line of scrimmage. Now you're standing right behind the Mike backer on second down. On third down, you're lined up in the slot, right? This is what took you so long. Like Bill Belichick, here it is. Where has he been all your life?
What do you think about the signing of Peppers by the Pats, Mr. Scott?
Pats, I don't really follow. That's a team I just don't care for. I don't care what they do.
What about the players? What about the guys? You don't care about the guys?
Well, I do, but that team is.
He wasn't.
Team,
He wasn't.
I don't really follow them. I don't really follow certain teams. I just don't really follow.
I understand. Kind of like me with the Vikings. But go ahead, Kurt.
Which is fine. Like Kevin Garrett said, if you don't want to be on, stay off. Don't get on the band. Just stay off. You want to be on the bandwagon.
Mike, what did you think about the Peppers fit with the Pats?
Well, I do agree with Mr. Scott. I don't like the Patriots, and if it wasn't part of what I had to do for a living, then I'd probably ignore them as well.
Mr. Scott, should we call them the team that shall not be named?
I like that very much.
Okay.
Sounds good.
But as Bill eloquently said, I agree with everything what he said. This is a great fit. He tore his ACL, but he's only 26, and only a 1-year deal kind of is a little inquisitive to me because here's this great player out of Michigan that does everything that Bill says, can play everywhere, do all the things you need as a safety, but only gets a 1-year deal at 26 years old. So I don't know what that was really about, but we shall see. If this injury is really worth a 1-year deal, or is it just okay, let me show you what I can do and play for the Patriots and all that esteem and stuff like that. So I like it. We'll just see how well he can play with that ACL recovery.
Now, Mike, we've talked about this a few times, and I never really saw your Michigan hat kind of fade your or influence, I'll put it like that, your decision making when it came to these players. But you've always been a little iffy on which one you take. Well, next week, it's going to be that time. You're the Jags, you got the first pick. Are you taking Walker or are you taking Hutchinson?
Yeah, I really, really want Hutchinson to go. Michigan guy, defensive end. He climbed the boards this year. It was always good, but I don't think he was the best defensive end coming off the board. And some will disagree. Some will say, well, he still isn't, but I can't turn my back against Michigan. But I do think that they're gonna need to protect Trevor Lawrence. He's He's their guy. He's the name of the brand. He's everything. And to do that, you need an offensive line. So I think Walker will go over Hutchinson.
Bill, who are you taking in this instance here?
So between Thibodeau and Hutchinson?
Walker.
Walker.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Walker's not even really a defensive end. Like, can we stop pretending that he is?
We're just calling him a defensive lineman. We're not
Oh,
calling him
okay,
a defensive
okay.
end. We're just calling him a defensive lineman.
Sure. So I called him a supercharged Justin Tuck, and he that's essentially what he is. He's a guy who's going to play everywhere from 3 tech to even at times. I mean, he's played nose at times when he was at Georgia. He's an interior pass rusher more than he is a real in the line of scrimmage guy. I think he's a good football player, but I mean, they're not even comparable in my mind. And I think it's a combination of things that happen. One is he had a great combine, and two, active disinformation. I think that there are some teams that want other teams to think that they like him and take him, so that the player they really like falls to them. But yes, he's a good football player, but he's not comparable to a guy like Aiden Hutchinson, who is he doesn't have the world's highest ceiling, but he has an extremely high floor. He has very little bust potential, while Trayvon Walker has a lot of bust potential. And I think even if he becomes what he's going to become, he's going to disappoint to some extent, because people are thinking he's going to become Michael Strahan or something, and he's nothing like that.
Mr. Scott, are you taking Walker, Hutchinson, or are you with the same mindset as Mike that you have to take an offensive lineman?
Yeah, I have to agree with Mike. They got a young quarterback. He showed, he had a tough year last year. Really, you couldn't really see how good he was, but he showed glimpses. Mm-hmm. And you think if you start building around that, you can't do everything at once with these things. I think they've got the quarterback, and so that's usually your, as Bill says, that's your top position. So they got to, I think, build around him. So I think that's the direction they should go to move up soon.
Now, Mr. Scott, I'm looking at the Rams depth chart here, and I'm looking at wide receiver in particular. And right now on their roster, their wide receivers are Cooper Kupp, Allen Robinson, Van Jefferson, Brandon Powell, Tulu Atwell. I believe that was the young man they were higher on last year.
Mm-hmm.
They also have Snor. What's his name? I can't
pronounce.
Vince Skowronek. That he saw a little action in the Super Bowl.
Oh, Skowronek. You know about Ben Skowronek?
Skowronek. Ben Skowronek. And then they have Landon Akers and Warren Jackson, J.J. Kozlowski. That's not going to, these guys aren't going to cost them a whole lot of money. But Mr. Scott, do you think that the Rams can or will re-sign OBJ?
Why? I mean, I don't know why they would. I mean, they're a championship team, and they got depth. They can draft somebody. A lot of receivers out there. I don't know why they would.
Mike, are you that pessimistic, or do you think that OBJ showed enough before he got hurt? And by the way, he is having his surgery. Before he got hurt in that game, do you think he showed enough that the Rams would want to resign him? What's your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, I do think they're going to resign him, especially coming off this ACL tear, and they had plans on doing it anyway. So he'll reduce his costs and not have to worry about finding a home elsewhere, especially coming off a Super Bowl ACL tear. And with the Rams, they can be patient with him because they're sort of fully loaded at the wide receiver anyway. So give him time, get a good deal for him. When he's time and he's healthy enough to hit the field, then you have that playmaker once again for you, just like they got him late last year. I don't know when he'll come back, week 4 or whatever, and I'm not sure yet because medicine always changes and always gets better. But yeah, I think probably I'm just taking a guess, week 4, and get him at a good deal, and there you go. Your wide receiver room is now set to Super Bowl contention once again.
What's your thoughts on the re-signing of OBJ, Bill?
It'll come down to numbers. So, is he willing to sign for a team-friendly, incentive-laden deal where his cap number is manageable, or is he trying to get pissed? If the answer is the latter, then no matter what they want, they probably won't be able to bring it back. They've had to sort of, get creative to have the team they have now cap wise. Like they can't, as the old thing goes, you can't pay everybody. I mean, they can pay everybody, but you can't pay everybody at the top of the market. That's probably how I should have put it. But if he's willing to sign a team-friendly deal with a lot of incentives written into it and money pushed back and that kind of stuff, sure. If not, they will be either way. They're going to be in the draft looking for more young talent because they are in a situation where they can't keep several of the players they have on the roster much longer. I think Van Jefferson is a guy that they're looking to, not in this year, but maybe the year after that, they're going to probably extend him. I don't think there's really anybody else of those group of receivers they feel super strongly about. But if somebody emerges, right, they'll probably want to hold on to them. And like I said, I think if Odell Beckham Jr. is affordable, if he's an affordable item, yes, they'll bring him back. If he's, like I said, looking to get, top 8, top 10, even top 12 wide receiver money, they're going to be forced. Their hand will be forced. They won't be able to re-sign it.
Bill, do you think that the Panthers will trade down from the number 6 pick? And if they do, what do you think would be the team that would be most likely that they would trade that pick to, or
Sure.
that would be wanting that pick?
So if they're trading down, I think the team that would be moving up would be the Saints. And I think the Saints might be packaging the picks that they picked up in the deal they made with the Eagles. So now they have 2 first-round picks thanks to the deal they made with the Eagles. And they, sent some other picks back to the Eagles. And then the Saints are now giving also the Eagles their first-rounder in 2023 draft. So I believe they made that deal to put themselves in position to get a quarterback. And I don't think there'll be any quarterbacks off the board at that point. So I think they'll have their pick of the litter, whichever one they like best. I'm hearing Malik Willis. But if it's someone else, if it's Corral, if it's anybody else, they'll pick it. Whoever, they'll have their chance. They'll have the pick of any of them because I don't think any of the quarterbacks go off the board before 6.
Mike, what's your thoughts? Will the Panthers trade down, and who will be their trading partner if they do?
Yeah, I do. They're probably going to trade down. It depends on who they feel is the number 1 quarterback out of this draft. If they feel Malik Willis is, then they might have to stay there. But I think someone like Matt Corral would be more beneficial, similar with the RPO kind of situation. Kenny Pickett, either one of those two. So they could trade down to like 15 to 20 and then get one of those guys and just be satisfied with that. It all depends on where these Corral and Pickett are supposed to go. That's where they'll end up.
Mr. Scott, what do you think? Do you think the Panthers will keep the number 6 pick, or do you think they'll trade it down to a team? And if so, what team?
Yeah, I don't know. They're another team that's got to kind of build, and if they see something at 6, I think they'll take it. I think they should grab at it, especially if they need a quarterback. So I'm gonna say they need to take that if they see someone they like.
Bill, the third will the third GM be a charm for the Giants to start rebuilding that dysfunctional offensive line?
Well, the good news is they're heading in the right direction. Joe Schoen is younger, smarter, more plugged in to using information. Dave Gettleman apparently used his considerable gut, maybe a little more than he should have, in order to try to figure out what players to select, and seemed to be one of those guys that was, I'll put it this way, not exactly committed to the use of things like analytics. I think that would be a nice way to put it. And now they have somebody who's going to pay attention to certain kinds of information and will listen to certain kinds of information, other than just sort of the trusting your own eyes thing. So they're in the right direction at least, but they've got a deep hole to dig out of. The only thing that sort of helps them is they are in the AFC, least, as people call them, where it's possible to contend, by going, 9-8 or perhaps even 8-9, but they have a deep hole to dig out. They need help everywhere, right? They need receivers, they need tight end, they need offensive and defensive alignment, they need everything. There's not a thing you can name that they don't need. They one of the teams. I mean, one of the advantages of being a terrible football team is no matter what you draft, you can use it.
Mike, what do you think about the new GM of the Giants? Is he finally going to address that dysfunctional line?
Yeah, not only do they have to address that, they need to get some stability in for Daniel Jones as well. The guy's had, I don't know how, since he's been in the NFL, he's had what is it now, third year, fourth year, whatever. He's had a different offensive coordinator, so there's been no stability for the guy. And yeah, I mean, without an offensive line, Saquon Barkley goes away. If there's any, great talent in Daniel Jones, which he was picked to have great talent. Can they get that out of him as well? Well, you can't get it out if there's no offensive line protecting him. So I'm hoping so, because it's a mess in New York without that.
What do you think about that offensive line in New York, Mr. Scott? Is it time for the GM to finally address it?
Yeah, I agree with Bill. They need some of everything. I mean, they've been down so long. They're going to waste the great running back that they have. If they don't really get something going in the next year or so, that's his career is getting, these running backs, they don't last very long. And he's been top with some injuries. So it looks like they've got a good coach that they're happy with, has a good reputation. So all they can do is go up.
Mr. Scott, are the Packers wise to count on right tackle Elton Jenkins and tight end Robert Tonyan this season?
Boy, I hope that they keep them. I'm hoping that the Packers are going to lose twice to the Vikings, and that this Aaron Rodgers thing is coming to an end. That's what I'm pulling for. I'm looking for this whole division to flip. I just don't see Detroit, Chicago being that much of a threat. And matter of fact, where's Demetrius? He's ducking me. He just tell him that he's ducking me. He's ducking me.
Demetrius is under. He's under the weather tonight, but
I'm sorry.
as you saw, I had a few questions for him, but he let us know that he was a little under the weather. But I'm sure he'll be back chomping at the bit to talk about that rivalry within your division. Mike, what do you think? Right tackle Jenkins and tight end Tonyan. We talk about the this being the year that the Packers possibly take wide receivers back to back, but there's some other holes that are going to need filling too. What's your thoughts here, Mike?
Yeah, Jenkins is a really good right tackle. Tonyan is serviceable. I guess maybe that's the key word for tonight is serviceable.
Serviceable.
So it's a weapon, but it's so they're going to need back to back. They're going to have to really find how to do this, because right now they just count on really anybody on that team. They're all serviceable or below. So Packers need a lot of help.
Bill, serviceable as in a 45, as in an AR-15, is it serviceable? Uh, Bill, are the Packers serviceable with these guys?
Exactly. Right. This is why I don't get excited about things. I mean, you can muddle through. Well, Tanyan is. I mean, he's going to be on the team and everything, but I think they're already finding his replacement, his eventual replacement. Once again, probably be a free agency, perhaps through other means. In the case of Elton Jenkins, it means all health, obviously, in that situation. He's a very good, very smart player who has struggled at times to stay healthy. But that's, I'm not going to say it's unimportant, because it is important. But I think, they've got to get to work. But yeah, I think that they find somebody to either pair with or replace Tanyan. And then I think they'll take a similar approach to, really to several positions. They don't have all the time in the world. They're not like a team like Seattle or something that you talk about, where they can afford to have a long, slow, thorough rebuilding process. They need to find a handful of players at peak positions, get them under contract, trot them out there, and try and win another Super Bowl.
Bill, your final thoughts for the evening, my man.
Oh, okay. Well, a little bit of the thunder was stolen, but I will come back to Jackie Roosevelt Robinson. And for this moment, I'm going to move on from, his military career and his sociological impact and things like that. Just talk about how his name should be mentioned far more often than it is amongst the greatest all-around athletes of all time. Obviously, he was able to play professionally in two sports. Now, in the case of football, he just played very briefly in what was called the old Pacific Coast League, which is really sort of a, a small regional alternative league. But he played with a lot of, college, guys who are now in College Hall of Fame. They weren't Hall of Famers at the time, obviously, but he played with and against a lot of great players in the West Coast, and it was an integrated league. He was such a great track athlete that at one point he held 6 of the top 8 long jump. 6 of the top 8 long jump, recorded long jumps, not in the country, in the world, right? 6 of the 8 top in the world were him, in the world. He was the odds-on favorite to win the long jump if we'd had either a 48 or a 44 Olympics, which we did not. But he would have absolutely killed in the 1940 Olympics if there had been one. That was his peak. This is the person who made the Hall of Fame and was either third or their fourth best sport. And, one last but not least is to mention what a terrific basketball player was. Now, basketball is still, a back page sport in those days. You didn't run anything about in those days about that, that sport on the front page. It just wasn't considered important enough. But he was a terrific basketball player, to the point that some people said he was the best basketball player, not only, in that Pacific Coast area at that time, but he was the best for, a quarter century or things like that. He was a terrific athlete, obviously a great and important man. So today I will be thinking about Jackie Roosevelt Robinson.
Mr. Scott, always glad to have you in on Thursday. Talk about my Steelers, and we still. I'm still trying to figure out because I think we played the NFC North, but we'll see. And we'll be playing you at. It'll be such a pleasure to sack Kirk Cousins on his home turf. But Mr. Scott, your final thoughts for the evening.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that, James. Really am. Against Trubisky, I think. I think that would be a great thing for us. But I enjoyed our talk earlier. We were talking about baseball. I know with my mom going to Parker High School in Birmingham, and their rival was a school called Fairfield, where Willie Mays went. And so they graduated the same year, born in 1930. And then Willie played up here for the Minneapolis Millers. And he hit like 400 in like 1953 or 54. And I remember my family being kind of just excited about Willie and my mom. And he went right to the Giants. He left. But at that time, Minneapolis baseball with the St. Paul Saints and Minneapolis Millers were tremendous farm teams. I mean, Campy played for the St. Paul team. Just some of the names you look at of team names that played on those AAA teams before there was the Minnesota Twins, which was actually supposed to be, actually the Giants were supposed to come here until Horace Stoneham came up here and said, man, this weather came up here this time of year. And he said, no. We can go to California. That'll be a better deal. But it's really good. It was really good talking about that and, thinking about those days. And Willie went to the high school, Fairfield, and played in the Negro Leagues when he was 15 or 16 with his dad. And they said his dad was a tremendous player. So I enjoyed that.
Well, hey, always good talking to you, Mr. Scott. Hope to see you next week. Mike, take us home, man.
Well, speaking of Willie Mays and the Giants, we had a situation. I say we because I'm a Giants fan, and a couple of days ago where unwritten rules came into play, and where the Giants were up, I believe 11-2, 12-2, something to that effect, and Mauricio Dubon decided he's going to bunt. And being up 12-2, the San Diego Padres manager did not take too kindly to that. And they had to make up a lot of reasons. Greg Kapler came out and said, well, we're here to win, every series. And if you can get into their bullpen even more, we're going to try to do it. And I mean, I don't know how to feel about unwritten rules. I mean, I like them when, it's my team and they're doing it. Not so much it's the other way around. I get a little upset about it. But I think there are reasons why they're unwritten. And there's sometimes you can get away with it a little bit. Sometimes you should, respect the other team. So with that said, I'm a little disappointed with the Giants. I think they definitely should have not done that. I don't know if Dubon was just like, hey, there's this giant hole near third base, so I'm just going to lay down and run to first base and not think about the score or anything. But I think if they go back, I don't think they would have done it. So unwritten rules is something that is fun to talk about, but there's a time and place for it. And in that game, in that moment, there sure wasn't for it.
Hey, well, thank you guys as always. Great discussion. Look forward to talking to everyone next week. And have a good night and a great weekend, everyone. See you next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Timberwolves.
We'll talk to you next week there, Mr. Scott.
Oh, boy. He does not miss an